This podcast is sponsored by IAPath. Unlocking your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com.
This is Profiles in Risk. Hosted by Nick Lamparelli. Every week, we interview those who risk life, limb, fortunes, career, and reputation, and those who work behind the scenes who look to protect and enlighten us about risk. You can find the show notes and other insurance-related content at insnerds.com. That's insnerds.com. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profiles in Risk. I'm your host, Nick Lamparelli. My wingman for this show is Antonio Canas. Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if people are going to know who I am.
I know. I wanted to be a little bit more formal with you because that's what it says on the webcam. Antonio. And I am pleased to introduce Jason Keck. Jason is the co-founder and CEO of Broker Buddha. Broker Buddha makes it easy for commercial brokers to sell insurance. By moving applications and renewals online, they help brokers increase retention and close rates while saving time. Jason, welcome to Profiles in Risk.
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate you having me. Tony, thanks for having me here. Thanks for the introduction to Broker Buddha. As you talked about, our goal is to make it easier for brokers to sell insurance. The platform itself is a next generation customer engagement platform. Like I said, designed for commercial insurance brokers. And our goal is to give your clients the best possible experience for purchasing, renewing, and managing policies. So excited to be here. Excited to tell you about it.
Yeah, that was my first question, so you stole it. But I have another first question.
Okay, what's your second first question?
Where'd the name come from?
It predates me, interestingly enough. I was brought into this business by some really smart people who know the insurance industry better than me. But we've talked about it a lot, and it makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. One is it's got the name of our audience in the name, so that's really helpful. And two is that it speaks to the benefits of the platform, which is obviously making the lives of brokers a lot less stressful. We also really like the alliteration in the name and the kind of I wouldn't say controversial, but semi-provocative title, which some people either associate with spirituality or getting high, and all of those things make people laugh, which is, interestingly enough, one of those things that I've discovered is amazing about the insurance industry. I've been in tech for 20 years, insurance for one. And the one thing that I've been most pleasantly surprised about is how interesting the people in the industry are and how fun they are. I think it's just one of those businesses which everybody will tell you it's not the sexiest thing on the planet. And so you really get a lot of personalities that come out because that's how you make it interesting every day. And so I've met some great people in the industry, and I'm excited to be involved. And the name is a unique part of the story, and I think we'll stick for a long time.
Oh, I love it. And for anyone that's listening to this, Jason does not look like a Buddha.
Not today.
He's quite thin. But okay, so you just mentioned that your background is not insurance.
Right.
So we're always fascinated with people that come in from the outside. Now, I have a feeling you came in from the outside because you saw a business opportunity. But let's start from the beginning, the genesis. Jason coming into insurance. Let's talk about what did you do before insurance, and then we'll start to piece together the storyline.
Yeah, I have been in the tech industry for 20 years. I have a computer science degree from Harvard. I spent the first half of my career working in large corporates. So I worked at Accenture and I worked at Nextel. So I did consulting, I did sales, essentially got a big business operating experience from those two businesses. Felt like it was a good education, but big business definitely wasn't my calling. I think there was always an entrepreneurial bug in me somewhere. And in 2008, I discovered a small technology company in London called Shazam before the iPhone had launched, and met a fantastic guy who invited me to be a part of the business development team. He had just signed up 20 international partners of ours and wanted somebody young and hungry to go out and grow those partnerships and grow the business. So I did that. 4 years later, I was running a 5-person team and a $17 million annual business. But the business has also evolved from being a licensing company to a consumer brand. And so we were doing less business development and more marketing and product development. And so I set off from there and said, look, I want to do something on my own. And over the course of a couple of years, I did a couple of my own startups, neither of which got anywhere near as successful as Shazam. But I learned a hell of a lot about building a business from the ground up. And I met during that time a guy named Mark Peter Davis. Mark is the managing director of Interplay. He was just starting Interplay at the time, and there wasn't a natural opportunity for us to work together then, but I really liked him, and I thought, I'm going to call that guy one day. I then stumbled onto an opportunity at Tumblr to run business development there. So I went from 10 years in large corporates to 10 years in like consumer mobile startups. And I was definitely closer to home for me that sort of second half of my career. Really loved the early stage stuff, really enjoyed the consumer facing stuff. But as I was getting a little bit, less motivated in my role at Tumblr, I reached out to Mark and said, hey man, I really miss the early stage startup stuff. I know you're doing some interesting things at Interplay. What do you got going on? And Mark said that the timing was perfect, that the biggest opportunity in his whole portfolio needed a CEO. And if I could get my head around joining the insurance industry, that'd be perfect.
And you were like, no way.
Well, it was one of those things. He got me all excited about the opportunity before telling me what it was. He's like, I'm not telling you what it was. Mark's a great sales guy, but he got me. He's like, look, if you do this right, this will be the last job you ever have to do. I promise. And I was like, what is this? What is he talking about? And he finally did the big reveal, and I was like, oh. My brother, interestingly enough, became a commercial insurance broker about 5 years ago. He's been in tech his whole career as well. And I called him and I was like, look, this guy that I know and really like and seems really smart is telling me that that your industry is still using, fax and paper and some pretty antiquated tools. And like, he's crazy, right? And
of course.
Of course.
No, that's not crazy at all.
He's like, actually, you'd be surprised. It's really backwards. And so that was how I got to, from that's the history of my career. Slightly different story around the beginning of Broker Buddha, which if you want, I can, it predates me a little bit, but I can tell you a bit about that if you want.
Sure. I want to go into that, and let's step into that piece. I'm also curious as to, did you really lean on your brother for insurance knowledge? Like, you must have had a million questions.
I'll tell you what, I did lean on him. I really, really, really love early stage startups. Like the 4 years of struggling through the two startups I had, I think there's sort of three phases of a startup. There's the 0 to 1 phase where you're just trying to figure out product market fit. You're trying to find an idea, solve a problem, and get that right. And I spent 4 years doing that with two different businesses and never got it right. It's a really hard problem. The second phase is taking, you figured that out, you figured out the problem to solve, and you need to now grow it from, call it, 1 person to 20 or 30 people. That phase never quite got to with either of my two startups, but I was interested in. When I joined Shazam, it was 50 people. So I was more at that sort of third phase of going sort of 50 to a couple hundred. And what I was excited about from the conversation with Mark was they seemed to have figured out the first part. They had some validation with another company in the business that was being successful in the technology. And, I think my personal trust in Mark, even at an early stage, combined with the feedback from my brother and a little bit of homework and just the desire to be at that stage of the business had me hooked early on.
Yeah.
So
when going through your website and researching Broker Buddha, the big thing is forms, which is if you're working for a broker or an agency, it seems like your life revolves around forms. And so I would guess my view of Broker Buddha was that it digitizes and simplifies that product, but I think there's a little bit more to that, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned at Shazam in the 4 years I was there is that as a new company, even a company as well branded as Shazam, you can only do one thing right. People are only ever going to remember you for one thing. And if you're trying to break your way into people's minds and their mindset, you can't launch a company. You can't launch a broker software platform that does everything. Everybody's going to just dismiss you out of the gates. They're just not going to be able to get their head around the one thing that you can do to help them. And so, interestingly, the platform that I had inherited when I joined did a lot more than what Broker Buddha does today. And a big part of my journey coming in was, all right, let's do what's called customer development in the startup world, which is you develop a hypothesis, you go out, you pitch it to clients, you get feedback, you evolve your idea, and you keep iterating on that until you get to the one thing that is both painful enough that people are willing to use it or buy it, and big enough that you can create a big business out of it. And it's not just forms, it's very specifically supplemental applications. Is the one part of the commercial insurance industry for which there is no good technology solution for brokers or clients.
Okay, so before you go on,
yep.
Just for the listener's sake that have very little familiarity with commercial insurance, give us an example of a supplemental application.
Yeah, so in the commercial insurance industry, probably 30 years ago, there was an organization called Accord, ACORD. It was a group of insurance companies came together to try and standardize applications. And they created standard apps for most types of coverage, right? The idea was to kind of simplify this process. Over time, what happened was every carrier started to ask for, okay, well, in addition to the Accord, if you have this type of business, we have this supplemental app, which is a carrier-specific application, which asks underwriting questions, which they use to, rate and quote your policy. And, for anything that's not I think of the world as general lines and specialty lines. So anything that's a general line, general is things like workers' comp and auto and property and general liability, you can generally get away with just a basic Accord form. For anything that's a specialty line outside of that, inevitably each carrier is going to ask you to ask you, the broker, to get a completed supplemental application, which uses their questions on their paper and their reps and warranties and their legal language. And so, as you might imagine, for a broker who's trying to get a quote from multiple carriers, that makes life pretty painful.
Because they can't just use the Accord, which, by the way, the Accord's not helpful either.
Well,
when I get one, I cringe.
Yeah, and what I've been hearing is that carriers are starting to move away from Accord. So even for general lines, they're not really called supplementals, they're just carrier-specific apps. They'll be like, look, if you're going to apply for this, forget the Accord, just use this. Okay. So it's not an Accord plus that, it's just use this.
Okay, so Broker Buddha makes life a lot easier by those supplemental apps, getting those digitized for one thing.
Yep.
And?
So we take static PDFs, 10, 12-page documents, we convert them into interactive, customer-friendly, online, mobile-ready smart forms. By smart forms, I mean that the questions are grouped into sections. You only see the questions that matter for the section you're looking at. The questions are interactive, so if you check certain boxes, other questions are revealed, and kind of makes a 12-page document feel less threatening. So that's the way. That's the basis for our business, and we built a technology that allows us to convert those static PDFs into smart forms. The second thing we do is layer on some mapping. So what we do is we identify similar questions across forms, so that whenever a client or a broker is filling out multiple applications for the same client, you don't have the doctor's office-like experience of filling out the same answers on multiple forms. Which actually makes people, brokers and clients, feel dumb, right? You feel like, why am I doing this? This is the stupidest thing in the world.
And I hear about that as well when I go visit agents or brokers, when I talk to them about my flood business, and it's like, another application. Like, do you please tell us you don't have another application? Like, so that's like just common. So Broker Buddha really, from that mapping thing, would allow the agent or the broker to basically, you only need to fill in some of the information once, and it transfers across all of the different possible applications that they could be using.
That's right. We, in addition to that, we've also created something called a composite application. And a composite application is essentially where we take multiple supplementals and we take the union of all those questions and we reorder them in a way that's very intuitive. And it's a virtual application, so there's no external PDF. It's just something you can put online. And if a client or a broker fills out all the questions in the composite, it will generate a supplemental for each of the supporting documents as well. So it's both the form-to-form mapping as well as the potential to do a composite app.
Yeah, and part of the Broker Buddha advantage as well is that it only asks the questions that are necessary for that, that line of business or for that particular carrier. How do you know how does it know? Is this proprietary? How does it know which questions to ask?
It's not as smart as you'd like to think. We trust our brokers. So what we found is that every broker operates differently. They have a very specific way that they like to collect information. And so what we do with our supplementals is we create templates for every broker, right? So if there's 100 questions on the application, but that broker knows that there's only 20 that matter, they have the ability to, in their version of our platform, to hide the questions that don't matter. And they can also make certain questions required. So the three key features of our template are required fields, hidden fields, and tooltips. So it allows brokers to essentially pre-answer questions that are kind of confusing for clients. They can also change the wording of questions if they want. So if the question says something like named insured, which is the first question on every application, and you're a new business and you have no idea what named insured is because that's just a threatening term, the broker can change the form to say, what is the legal name of your company, right? It's just that simple.
That's very cool.
Do you advise brokers? Like, do you talk to them and say, questions phrased in this way or that way are less threatening? And
we don't try to tell them how to do their business. Everybody's got a different view of what they should and shouldn't do. Sometimes we will, with the Accord forms specifically, because those are shared across, all the forms are shared across all the brokers, but the Accord forms are so unfriendly that we've started to set the templates in a way that is a bit more conversational, to try to inject our voice a little bit in there, because anyway, the Accords, they're tough. So, yeah. But we don't tell them how to do it. So.
What I love about Accord forms when I get multi-location
nothing,
almost nothing,
right?
Multi-location schedules, and I start to scroll through, and I can't tell one property from another on them. I actually have to print it out and lay it on my desk because it's too difficult to sort through, and each of the pages aren't the same. So they'll have replacement value in one box in one page. And then it says, location 2, replacement value is in a completely different box. And it's
you can't scan for it.
Plus then I have to type everything out. So that by itself, not receiving it as a PDF, fine, but not being able to have it digital, where I now have to, as a human being, you're going to trust me to manually type the value that's on that form. 1 million becomes 10 million, and now.
And Nick, that's not because you're a tiny MGA. I was a middle market underwriter at Liberty, and that's the same way that my processors are doing it. They're manually typing it, and there are hundreds of values just manually typing them in.
Yeah. So that gets me to my next question.
Okay.
Jason, is when I'm imagining Broker Buddha and I'm imagining it being an agent using that, I'm thinking of all the different productivity tools I have, Wunderlist and Calendly and Boomerang, and all I'm thinking of is if I'm an agent and someone approaches me with Broker Buddha, I'm like, another app, but yours integrates, right? So can you talk about the integration of that so that it can streamline itself?
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for, and a former technologist, I'm always looking for ways to connect systems together. It's just something that I kind of geek out about a little bit. You insurance nerds will appreciate that. We are about to release a Zapier app. So anybody who's a self-proclaimed nerd should know what Zapier is. If you don't, check it out now. It's a very powerful B2B product integration tool, which allows you to work with something called triggers and actions. So a trigger is basically an event that happens in one system. So client submits an application, or client changes their address, or broker adds a new contact. You can then take an action in another system. So the classic example is client submits an application on Broker Buddha, you create an opportunity in Salesforce or whatever CRM system you use. And so the benefit of that is that we don't need to do custom integrations with 1,000 apps out there. In fact, thanks to Zapier, we're effectively integrated with 1,000 apps. It does require a little bit of work on behalf of the user, but ultimately you want to define what that integration does for you. It's not going to be the same for every broker. And so our Zapier app will be in beta starting next week, and that's our primary integration tool. The other, I don't know if I can call this an integration tool, but we have the ability to import clients, contacts, and policy information into Broker Buddha. So if you can export that stuff from your agency management systems, we can do that. The two big agency management systems, Applied, Epic, and Vertafore, have integration capabilities. They are broker specific, so they allow brokers to work with them to do integrations, and through our APIs, we can support that. But those don't come out of the box.
Yeah. I know what Zapier is. I've never used it. So if I'm an agent listening, it's probably something my IT person is going to have to kind of connect some of the wires. And we'll get right back to this podcast right after a short message from our sponsor. I'm here with Chris Stanley, founder of IApath. So Chris, what is IApath and why did you start it?
Well, Nick, I started IApath because a friend of mine wanted to get into the industry and couldn't find anything online about how to become an independent auto damage appraiser. And I just thought that was crazy and kind of unacceptable. So I decided I wanted to make it easier to be and become an independent appraiser and adjuster by providing people with information, inspiration, and eventually certification. From the beginning, it was important to me that I'd be a real human being that people could connect to. Yet, I dreamed it would become an organization that was big enough to make a difference. So what is IApath? We're here to give people a clear-cut path to becoming an IA. Thus the name IApath.
IApath, unlocking your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com. I know what Zapier is. I've never used it. So if I'm an agent listening, it's probably something my IT person is going to have to kind of connect some of the wires.
Here's the deal. There's probably two. There are, you can divide the agent world into two categories. There is old school agents who probably only use an agency management system, and their websites are, maybe they have like WordPress on their website or something like that. And then you have newer agents who are looking at more modern tools like Easy Links or Tech Canary, or maybe some don't even use an agency management system. They're just on Salesforce, for example. And so people in those categories tend to be younger. They haven't been in the business long. They don't have 30 years of information locked up in their agency management system. And so those people will be much more familiar with Zapier, and their systems will be more open to doing integrations. I think it'll be a while before either Vertafore or Applied has a Zapier app that you can integrate with, unfortunately.
Yeah. You're making a bet on the agency system and the brokerage system. There are a lot of tech companies, tech folks like you, that don't see the value, that think millennials and Gen Zers, as they become insurance buyers, will absolutely not want to buy from an agent or from a broker. You're making a company bet that they will that they will. What do you see that the other tech folks don't see?
Yeah, I think that anybody who's spending $1,000, any millennial, or frankly any age, is likely to spend $1,000 or $2,000 on their company's insurance policy. They're likely either a small business or a startup. They don't have time. They don't care. They've got some legal requirement that they have to have a policy, or maybe they think they should. So they buy the lowest possible plan they can get, which covers for $1 million. If you're a new business owner, like $1 million in coverage, you're like, man, how am I ever going to need that? You probably don't make $1 million in 10 years. So from that guy's perspective, man, go to CoverWallet, go to MBroker, put in my information, pull out my credit card, makes a ton of sense. That business, no broker wants to write that business anyway. No broker wants to write $1,000 bot policies. It doesn't make sense. They don't make enough money on it. They can't afford to service it. If you're spending, let's say your business graduates, you're now a real company, you've got employees, you've spent 3 years, you've got real revenues, and all of a sudden you got real risks, right? And you don't know anything about those risks. You don't have any idea, like, what's the likelihood of something happening? How the hell do you make that decision with a computer and a single offer on a price? Like, I just don't think you can. And so my view is, if you're spending $10,000 a year or more on insurance for something like your business asset, which you own and or are responsible for, you don't want to buy from a computer. You got to talk to somebody. Even if that person is just talking you through the decision, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Now look, $1,000 may creep up to $5,000. It may even creep up to $10,000 over the next few years. But I think over $10,000, if you don't have somebody to talk to, it's really hard to make a decision. You're not going to spend a year figuring out how to make that decision. You got way too many other things to worry about.
Yeah, it's a waste of their time and resources to become an expert in insurance markets. I would call myself a subject matter expert. I'm raising my hand. I have an agent. I have a personal lines agent. Why? Because I don't want to have to do the shopping. So it's worth me paying them 15% and just say, just get me a solid deal. Yeah.
And guess what? The guy that you can buy from online is taking 15% too. So it's not like they're
Lemonade's taking 20%.
Right. Like, so it's not like you're getting a better deal.
It's got to be the greatest marketing strategy ever to make everyone in the world think that you're this like benevolent company, and you're taking more than the broker you're trashing.
There you go. Clever guys. Good business.
Yeah. Okay. So, where do you see this going? So wait, I want to stay on Insurtech for a second.
Okay. Cool.
I've been very impressed with the amount of tech companies. We've interviewed a bunch on the podcast. So Agent Av, Cover, Brokerlift, and I'm probably missing one or two. I apologize. But you're all tackling very unique areas of the agency system. You just said that as a personality type, you like to connect systems. So where is all of this going? There's a lot of agency technology. If I were an agency owner, I might become a little bit overwhelmed with all of the different things I need to worry about.
Yeah. So going back to the Shazam lesson, do one thing and do one thing right. Okay. So being the solution that enables applications and renewals, especially for specialty lines, is a big opportunity. It's a big pain point, and I see at least 3 to 6 months of development around that, evolving the feature set, making it better, just ultimately kind of nailing that and owning that. There's a lot of places to expand from there. There are different parts of the broker operations that we could support. I doubt we'll get into claims. Personally, I've always been more on the sales side of things, so I see this ultimately being some form of opportunity management system for brokers, right? If you think about a policy, every policy you have is effectively an opportunity to renew 12 months later, and the opportunity life cycle for that has its own unique workflow. right?
Yeah, so you're pitching this as not only technology to streamline efficiency for something that we've now discussed as a big scab. It's a pain, you know.
Yep.
But you're saying no. This is your marketing opportunity. We're going to simplify it for you, but you should be using this in your sales process. This is your opportunity to connect with your clients in a way that's very different than how anyone else is connecting with them, almost like in an emotional way.
Yeah. So CRMs, customer relationship management systems, are primarily, interestingly enough, they're mostly back office. Like if I think of Salesforce and other CRMs, they're very much about, like, I want to know about my client. They're not customer engagement tools, right? So our platform today is focused on the relationship between the broker and the client and enabling the best possible experience by really taking away all the mundane parts of the data entry and data storage. And so that interface between the broker and the client, which is where they build their trust, that's their relationship, that is a closely guarded asset of the brokers. And we want to really just embed ourselves into the enablement of the best possible customer experience. So
I love where that's going. It starts out as, hey, here's technology to simplify something, but it's really, you think deeply enough, it's like, if you do that part well, it'll do all of these other things, including the most important thing, which is engagement with your customer. I love that.
Yep. And that's always, it's funny, I've got a computer science degree from Harvard, but I've never been a developer. I've always just been more of a people person. And so that sort of like person-to-person interaction for me is just something I've lived and breathed for 20 years of my career. And the appreciation of how technology can make that better is just something that is part of my DNA. And so, I'm oozing that as much as I can into the product. We put a big effort into the look and feel and the design and the responsiveness of the site. One of the things that makes us really different is that we've got high-res images, we've got animations. Like, this feels almost like a modern, I'm not going to say a consumer product, but like if you use this, it feels almost like you're using, like Google or Facebook or something like that. It's just got that kind of interactivity to it that makes people like, oh wow, like they get a little bit emotional, which is something that doesn't happen in insurance.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
There was a discussion on LinkedIn this morning about what is Insurtech, and a lot of fancy answers, and tech is tech. Tech people are brilliant, so the tech is not the problem. The tech is the easy part. It's what you just described and what we hit on this show all the time. For people that are listening here, they'll know I always pound on the soft skills. The tech's the shallow stuff. It's the soft skills where you can dig in deep and figure out what's the pain. What's the solution here? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? That's the hard part.
Totally. Yep. But if you can use the tech to make the soft stuff better, then you're more than just a utility. You're a differentiator, right? You're something that people can't get rid of because, man, manufacturing the emotional connection is just hard. And if you can create trust by exposing something that's technology forward and user friendly to a client, man, what an asset. So
Buddha with a peace sign.
That's right, man.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So that gets to where you see yourself pretty much. Like you're like you said, it's more consumer oriented than just streamlining a process for a broker and agent. It's basically it becomes part of the marketing.
Yeah, it's very customer oriented. Look, my vision for the company is to create a level of transparency that's never existed in commercial insurance. So much of information is tied up in forms and filed systems, and we want to liberate that data, and we want to make it available to brokers. Right? Brokers are our clients. We think they're an important part of the ecosystem, and we want to give them the information they need to be great partners for both their clients and their carriers. And it all starts with being the entry point for applications, and it ends with us being, an operating system for not just brokers, but potentially, expanding out beyond brokers.
Yep. You start with the one thing though. So
that's one thing right.
That's the lesson learned. That's the lesson I'm taking away from this.
if you're a broker, go sell one type of policy or go sell to one market. Like just be a specialist in one, get a niche, get your niche, get people to remember you for that niche, get referrals in that niche. Make sure it's a big enough niche that you can build a real business out of it.
Yeah.
But start with one thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, Tony, because that's kind of what happened to us, right? You know, we started doing one thing. We had a particular vision, but then all of a sudden we could hear all of these complaints about all of these other things. And it's like, maybe we should solve that problem. You know, like everyone seems to be talking about it. So
you get permission. That's the nice thing. When you do one thing right, you get permission to expand out. Oh, you did this right. I see how that's related to that. Let me go over there and do that. And so that's why it's key to get the one thing right first.
Yeah. So what's your opinion about insurance altogether? We talked about the broker. It's going to be around. What will insurance look like? How are people going to be buying it and dealing with it 5 or 10 years from now? I keep hearing about everyone's going to be buying from their phones. I just can't believe that. But I'm not a digital native. I'm one of those immigrants coming in to it. I would never do that. How are we going to be conducting business in insurance? Are your forms going to be on a phone? Is that what we're turning into?
Our forms are on the phones now. Whether or not people want to fill them out on the phones is another question, right? Do you want to fill out an 8-section application where every section has 20 questions? No. I think over time, the ability for underwriters to collect data from third parties will be meaningful. I think there's a lot of distrust in the industry right now. I think insurance companies believe that clients are lying on their application to get better deals. In fact, I'm sure they do. And I think
absolutely.
and I think clients, insureds, believe that carriers are taking advantage of them because they spend these premiums and they never get to see it back. And so I think it's kind of an unfortunate dynamic that the broker has to manage. Tony, you look like you have something to say.
Psychologically, it's a very, very, I spent so much time thinking about this. It's such a difficult dynamic. We sell a product that when properly used will never be used, right? So like the best return you can get from your policy is you never used it. If you have to use it, something went wrong. And so it's psychologically, it's a very hard product to really get your head around. And there's a lot of distrust. Absolutely. And so my question is, how can we use technology in order to bridge that distrust? How can we use technology to help the carrier better predict who might be lying in their application and not be so difficult with those who are probably not lying? And also on the other side, to help the customers see that really the price of what you're paying is basically a pass-through. What the price that you're paying is basically your piece of the aggregate of claims. If we can keep claims down, your price is going to stay down.
Yeah. So actually, the first part I don't have the answer to be honest. That's a challenging question. The second part
that's $1 trillion answer.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. The second part I do though, right? So our goal with transparency here is to essentially give brokers the information that they need to be able to tell a client, hey, this is the right rate for you, and here's why, right? Right now, they can't do all that. Information is locked up in the carrier's underwriting, years of underwriting data, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if the broker has application information, and they have quote information, and they have loss information, and they have that aggregated, not they, but if we have that aggregated across a large network of brokers, then all of a sudden we can start to see things like, oh, this client over here is getting ripped off, right? And this client over here is paying, way too little. And brokers will be able to actually identify where the inefficiencies are. And that's why we're going to give them that power so that they can properly advise their clients on whether they should be getting more or less coverage. And so, but right now, all that data is stored in like I said, PDFs and email folders. There's just no way to interrogate that data and aggregate it in a way that allows you to expose them. So by digitizing the application process and eventually the response process, the quoting and the buying and all that information, all of a sudden we have it in a structured way, and we can start to show brokers, hey, your clients are getting ripped off or your clients are getting a great deal, and that can help them.
I know that your main customer is the broker. Are you having any trouble with the carriers, with getting data, with getting access, with the lack of APIs? Has that been a challenge?
We have zero engagement with carriers today. Our handoff, like I said, we're customer engagement, so the client submits their application. The output of our product today is a PDF, which the brokers send off for quotes.
It all comes from the data in the broker's own system, basically.
It comes from a combination of the client, the broker, and the systems.
Okay.
It's essentially, applications are a collaboration process between those three people, and the output is a signed document that you can send to a carrier to get a quote. So that's the way it works today. The carrier integrations sound painful, frankly. Everyone's got a different way of well, first of all, few of them have APIs, and the ones that do are most of them are antiquated technology. A few of them have modern technologies, but the effort required to digitally integrate with every one of them doesn't sound like something that is a good business. So,
Jason, it doesn't sound painful. It is painful.
I haven't tried. Well, I've spoken to a few. You know what? It's going to be 10 years before, and even then, it just doesn't go right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's a solution. I think this is like a 100-year problem.
We have
conferences, and I speak to people that have either worked for or worked closely with large insurance companies, and you hear it over and over. The IBM mainframe. Was it the AS400?
Yep. There you go.
It's almost the entire industry is being run off of those mainframes, probably with tapes, and I don't know how to solve that because everyone in the carrier knows it's a problem as well, and they can't fix it. So
we have some ideas. I wouldn't say they're certainly not in practice, and we certainly haven't developed them yet. But I think there's ways that we can streamline a lot of the stuff across the industry. I'll save those for the next conversation.
I smell a subsidiary.
Not a subsidiary, man. Look, our end goal here is to be an operating system for the entire industry, right? So across the board.
That is big.
It's a big deal. Look,
that's a big goal.
I'm not in this for the short stint. I just turned 40. I see this as a 5 to 10 year career play where, ultimately this will be what I hope is the last job I ever have to do. I'm sure I'll do more of it because I love building businesses. But, the key we have is that because we're doing customer engagement, we have access to the customers, right? At the end of the day, those are the people spending the money. And when you own the customer, man, you've got a really powerful business at your hands.
Very true.
And we're partnering with brokers to facilitate that ownership.
Very true. Very true. Okay. Well, we're getting close to the end of the recording. This is the period where we transition over to the personal stuff. So we get to know a little bit more about Jason Keck.
Me? You want to know about me?
Yes.
What can I tell you?
Well, you're the computer scientist. So I'm expecting the answer to this to be pretty off the wall. What tools or techniques do you use to stay productive?
Okay. I've developed a lot of tools across my career. Some of them are more operational. Some of them are technological. I'm all about frameworks, frankly. And from an operational perspective, I do quarterly plans. I do monthly reporting. I do weekly goals. I do daily stand-ups with my team. Those, from an operational perspective, it's a very basic framework that I've used since I started doing startups, and it's incredibly effective for communication, collaboration, and prioritization. Makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So your team, like, what do you use in between? Like you're talking to each other, but then digitally, how do you guys all stay on track?
Yeah, we use Slack for chat. We use email. We use technologies. We use GitHub as our repository for our code, which has they have a collaboration function where you can talk about the code that's submitted and how it could work better. The communication tools are not that. I send out a weekly report. It's pretty standard stuff. Where things get more interesting, I think from a tech perspective is, I use tools like Youre, which is an email tool for tracking emails and responses, and also for creating mail campaigns. I use Pipedrive for opportunity management, which is a very tech-enabled CRM. I use Boomerang, which is a plugin for Gmail to do things like scheduling emails for later, to snooze emails that I want to look at later, help me get closer to inbox zero. I use Zapier to integrate all these systems. I use Calendly to book sales calls. And probably the most powerful tool I've had so far is a product called QuickMail, which is I would call it a modern email marketing tool. And I've developed an email drip campaign that I've actually gotten compliments on the genuine nature of my emails and their cadence. So there's two parts of any kind of email campaign. One is like how frequently you email somebody, and two is exactly what you say and when you say it. And I spent a lot of time refining this to the point where my calendar right now is backed up for 3 weeks with sales calls. So if you get an email from me right now and there's a link to book a meeting, it's probably not till the end of April, which is probably means I need to hire a salesperson.
Well, I feel guilty now because we get you on this podcast when you could be closing a deal.
Please, man. When I get tons of leads from doing things like this, and they're great.
Good.
When people get those emails and they've heard of us, and that's when things really start to move forward quickly. So
credibility, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
What books have been influential in your business and/or personal lives?
I wish I had more time to read right now, so I don't have a lot of great answers for this lately. I tell you the one book that I don't necessarily subscribe to completely, but it did have a big impact on me. It was a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I read it about 10 years ago while I was at Shazam, and it was it was a over exaggeration of how you could take a 40-hour work week and compress it into 4. And I tried to practice it at Shazam, and it went horribly wrong. Not because I tried to work 4 hours, but because I tried to. They really encouraged delegation, and unfortunately at the time there wasn't enough people there to really delegate work to, and people didn't appreciate it when I was delegating things I should have been doing to them. But the lessons from the book are really powerful. Like, one of the questions I vividly remember it's related to fear and risk. And at the end of every chapter, they have these exercises you do. And one of which was, imagine you only have 1 hour a week. What would you do? And it's a really hard exercise, but it really emphasizes prioritization, right? And what would happen if you didn't do everything else? You're like, well, would the world end? No. And then they sort of ask you, what's the worst thing that could happen if, all these things came to fruition? And you sort of go through that, and then it tells you to rank it on a scale of 1 to 10. How bad is it? And you're like, actually, it's not that bad. All of a sudden, you're like, man, I've got a lot of busy work that is not important, and the consequences of not doing them, it's not that bad. So really, really inspired me to think about trying to only do the things that have high leverage impact. And that's stayed with me for a long time. So
yeah, Tim Ferriss is fantastic.
Yeah,
that put him on the map. And actually, his marketing process for that book is generally what's used by almost anyone when they're marketing that informational material. He was the one that came up with the concept of like landing pages. Yep. And handling marketing that way. Yep. I will put a link up to his podcast because I believe he is the #1 podcaster globally. Like he does that kind of thing that you just described, real in-deep productivity exercises on his podcast with his guests. Top notch.
Yep.
Jason, the hour flew by. It was fantastic to learn about Buddha, Broker
Buddha. Yep, there you go.
It had gone so well.
It was such a good alliteration that I swapped everything around. I apologize. So good to learn about it. I want to see you solve that $1 trillion idea and get us on better footing. So Thanks to Tony for co-hosting. Jason, thank you for being on the show, enlightening us, and I look forward to having you on. And let's see what we can do with getting the entire industry on one avenue of trust.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to knowing you guys and being a part of the space for a long time. So really appreciate it. Thanks.
Same.
Thank you.
My guest this week has been Jason Keck of Broker Buddha. I said it right this time. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, man.